Like, can you explain to everybody the concept of subtext, because it is, I think, a lost art, and how to, if you have any tips on how to create, advice on how to create good subtext in a scene,
Sure.
specifically.
Wait, why do you think it's a lost art?
Well, because we were just talking about it, samurai, like, hey, Johnny, it's like I'm walking over there now, it's like I've seen so many bad movies, or I've read so many bad scripts that have that on the nose dialogue or on the nose, even action. It's just like there's no subtlety, there's no, there's no nuance into it. Like a look can say 1,000 words, but they write the 1,000 words, as opposed to putting, hey, she looked at him in this way. And that says all you need to know. And there's some, and I never can have a good example, but there's, all the masters have these scenes that, there's a look, there's a touch, there's, a cut to an object that says everything you want to know about what's going on in that scene without actually having to say a single word. And that, if you have any advice on how to make that easier, I'm all ears.
You make a good point. Okay, so the best way to understand subtext is to understand its role in any given scene or in any given story, which the story is the context. So you break it down into the 3 layers: the context, the subtext, and the text, right? Mm-hmm. So the context is the conflict that you're actually dealing with. It's the setting, and it's the scenario that the character is in. And then the subtext is the intention of the character. Now, a lot of people tend to confuse, the subtext of a scene with the theme. And what I would argue is that the theme is really the subtext of the author or the writer of the story, which we can get into that. You could even label it, some people go so far as to label it like proto-subtext and meta-subtext, which is really just theme and subtext. When you're writing your characters, the subtext is the intention of your character, which means everybody has a subtext because everybody has an intention. Everybody wants something. And then the text is just the layer on top that we're actually seeing. So most of the time, when we're writers, I like the way Vince Gilligan said it. He looks at dialogue as the cherry on top of the pie. Mm-hmm. He spends most of his time trying to figure out the psychology of the characters, what they want, and what's impeding them. That's all context. So context is, me sitting on a bus. I think I used this reference in a couple other interviews. But me sitting on a bus, you and I are sitting on a bus. I'm holding your baby on my lap, pointing a gun at her, and I say, go ahead and drink it. And you're holding a vial of poison. So the context is we're on a bus. The power dynamic is I have a gun. I have something you care about deeply, and you have something that deeply threatens your life. That's all context. So the subtext is I want to threaten you, or I want to challenge you. So I say, go ahead and drink it. Go ahead and drink it is the text. So it's just one layer. And that ultimately, the scene direction and everything about that is describing the context and the way they're maneuvering the context. So as soon as you write the dialogue, which is the final cherry on top. Now, people like Tarantino have these incredible dialogue that draws you in, and it makes you like. But what most people don't appreciate about Tarantino is actually he has all the context and the subtext in such a way that it's driven by a lot of tension, a lot of conflict, and it's all implicit. And so most of the time when they're talking about good classic music or good movies or something, right, what they're really talking about is, like who's stronger here, who has more power here. Mm-hmm. And most Tarantino movies tend to be very invested in who is the one that's mostly in control, which is what I like. That's a great way to approach a scene, is to ask, like, okay, somebody wants something, somebody's going to stop them. Who has more power? And then you build that out, you draw that out as much as you can, and then the final turn is what answers the question of who has more power.
So would you? That's a great analogy, by the way. I was just thinking, like, again, I want to ask you if you feel that this is subtext. And I think it is, where, like, let's say there's two people talking about the day's events, and whatever they're talking about, which on the surface doesn't seem like it's really bothering anybody, but one of the let's say the wife is, or the husband actually is doing the dishes while the wife is talking to him, and as they're saying whatever they're saying, the husband starts getting upset but does not say a word, and all of a sudden he just starts scrubbing the pan so hard that he starts to bleed. Literally, his hands start to bleed because he's so upset, but not a word is said, and she walks out of the scene and he walks out of the scene, but you know some shit just went down. Is that a good example of subtext?
Sure. Yeah. So let's break it down. What is the context of the scene?
The scene is there. She's talking about the new job offer that she got, and her new boss, who's 25 and hunky.
Okay, so great. So you just set up a scenario that he's feeling insecure about their relationship, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Extremely insecure if he's bleeding. I mean, that's a pretty intense.
Well, that's what my question is. As an audience, I'd wonder, like, okay, what is motivating this massive insecurity, which immediately gets you into the head of the character.
And where are we in the movie? We could have already set that up in a few other scenes prior, and this is just this is the last, like, almost the last straw, because he doesn't lose it yet, but he's still kind of repressing his anger, and he's the only one that sees the blood, or he breaks a dish or something like that.
Or it might be a commercial for a smoother Brillo pad.
Exactly. But basically, so the actions don't represent on the outside. What it seems to be happening is it's not about the washing of the dishes. It has nothing to do with the dishes. It's about what's going on inside, and the dishes are just an expression of what's going on.
And then if you want to add layers to the subtext, first of all, is the wife aware that it's making him jealous?
Right.
And if she is, what are the motives in her presenting it in such a way? Maybe she's taunting him. Maybe, that's when it becomes interesting, is this whole idea of, like, expanding people's motives to be more duplicitous. And, somebody that presents themselves as your best friend, can you really trust them?
Right. Yeah, exactly.